Welcome to episode one of the Sleep Connection Conversation with Experts, part of the Mind at Midnight podcast, where we explore how sleep shapes mental health and overall well being. In today's episode, we're joined with a representative from the National Alliance for Mental Health Illness to talk about the connection between sleep and mental health, and why rest is so important for emotional wellness, and the resources available to support individuals and their families in the mental health journeys. I'm Kritika Srinivas, and joining us here today is Angela Hudson, the Executive Director for the National Alliance on Mental Health Illness. Prior to her current role, she served as the National Alliance for Greater Houston's Vice President of Programs and Partnerships, where she supported earlier identification of those facing a mental health condition. This removed the barriers for mental health services and supports, and decriminalizing those in mental health conditions by advocating for appropriate treatment options. She has also been instrumental in leading the operations for the psychoeducation programs servicing family members of loved ones diagnosed with a serious mental health condition, parents of children diagnosed, military family members reeling from deployment related challenges, and those searching for their own recovery path. Today, we're talking about how sleep affects mental health and the important resources and advice NAMI provides to support individuals and their families dealing with these challenges. Now, let's understand sleep and mental health. Can you explain to us why sleep is so important for mental health?
Well, thank you, Karthika. It is so wonderful to be on this podcast with you this morning, and I appreciate the invitation. But I want to highlight that sleep is not just a luxury. It's not something that we just get to do. Matter of fact, there are a lot of Americans that struggle with adequate sleep, and sleep has a lot to do with brain health. It impacts our emotionality because healthy sleep is so important for our brain to recalibrate. Actually, deep sleep, which is called REM sleep, it's required to restore our memory and even process, upsets, disappointments, and traumas that we experience in life. So without having adequate and good healthy sleep, it increases the likelihood that we're going to suffer with mental health disorders like anxiety and depression.
So, what are some common sleep problems that you see that affect mental health?
Well, people either sleep too much or they sleep too little, you know? And so we often say that, if there's raggedy sleep cycles going on, then there's probably some raggedy emotional and mental health as well. So it's usually a sign or one of the earliest symptoms that there might be an underlying mental health problem. But one of the things that we've noticed just for the last decade is with the onset of social media and, people wanting to watch TV late at night, even fall asleep with their social media, YouTube, movies, everything playing that, or even with headphones on, people try to sleep with headphones on. Well, we know that the blue light that comes from these devices, the electricity that it introduces into our being, that it disrupts sleep. So the first thing you do if you think you might have some sort of sleep problem is develop a healthy sleep diet, like get rid of all the things that would interrupt your sleep. I remember years ago, and I think I was a teenager, so this is many moons ago. Um, Oprah did a segment on quality sleep where she was actually in a bed on stage talking about how important it is to make sure that your bed and all the things that surround your sleep time kind of give you the best, highest quality of sleep. And so, that's the kind of stuff that would go into a sleep diet. Making sure your mattress is right, your pillows are right, the temperature in your room is right, that that you have all the blankets and things you need, that your environment supports healthy sleep. So sleep diet is very important. But then I would recommend if you still can't get quality sleep, you wake up and you're just as tired as you was when you went to bed. You can't focus during the day. You feel foggy. Um, you forget a lot of things. That could be because your brain has not had a chance to reset the way it needs to. Um, and so, for that reason, you might want to go to your primary care provider and say, I'm just having a really hard time with sleep. And let the physician, your primary care physician, rule out any other things. There could be a hormonal imbalance, there could be just a host of things that are physical, right, and medical that may be creating the problem with sleep. But once all of that is ruled out and you're still having problems with sleep, that's when you look for professionals or medical specialists that focus on sleep disorders because you got to get the sleep under control. Sleep even has a lot to do with your weight. So your body's replenishing of cortisol and re-regulating how much cortisol is poured into your system is regulated by your sleep. And we all know that cortisol, if there's too much of it, it increases our weight. Not any weight, especially our belly weight. So, there's just so many reasons why high quality sleep is so important. Now, I have to admit, I've been a student as well. And I know that the night before a big test, or the night before the SAT, or the GRE, or the LSAT, or something like that, you're probably going to have trouble going to sleep. But that one instance is not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about patterns where either you're sleeping for 2, 3 days with no ability to rouse yourself, you don't want to leave the house, you don't want to leave the bed. That's the kind of um, oversleeping or not sleeping for 3 or 4 days. That's the kind of problem we're looking at when you've got to look for professional help.
So, going on to this, I wanted to add, what are some myths about sleep and mental health that you would like to debunk?
Well, first of all, it doesn't mean that you absolutely have a mental health problem if you can't sleep. But if it's not addressed, it could lead to not being able, you know, to manage you'll be more irritable, you'll have more anxiety, you'll have anger episodes, depressive symptoms, you'll have impulse control difficulties if you don't get your sleep under control. But it doesn't mean you have a chronic mental health diagnosis. So the earlier you address it, the better, right? There's nothing to be afraid of. You don't have to think, oh, now I'm going to have this other. Um, the other thing is people think if they take sedatives, like I'm talking about over the counter stuff, if they take something, they need to take something like a pill or drink alcohol to go to sleep. To be honest with you, sometimes when you take those, outside drugs to go to sleep, it makes it harder to go to sleep. So the best thing to do is get under a doctor's supervision. If you're going to use any supplement to go to sleep, make sure a physician knows what you're doing and that it's the right substance at the right dosage at the right time. Plus, you want to make sure that if it doesn't work, a doctor knows that it doesn't work so they can look at the reasons why. I think those are the two big things. Yeah. Because I know, when I was in college, people would take these things called no-dos to stay awake, and they would take other pills to go to sleep. But getting on a cycle like that is not going to give you the quality sleep. It's really like fake sleep. It's not real. And so then you don't get into that deep sleep that your brain needs to replenish. So the news there is stay away from artificial outside supplements to go to sleep unless you're under a doctor's care.
Okay, thank you so much. So, how do anxiety, depression, or other mental health conditions interact with sleep?
It's kind of like the story of the chicken and the egg. What came first, right? Did not getting quality sleep cause the anxiety and depression symptoms, or did the anxiety and depression system symptoms start and so now you can't sleep? I say it doesn't matter which came first, the chicken or the egg. What matters is addressing it, right? So now we're here. A person may recognize that they're depressed in a way and they can't snap out of it. The things that they used to do to, bring themselves back up, it's not working. Also, if you have anxiety or depression symptoms for more than 2 weeks, definitely more than 4 weeks, if your friends who are very close to you are going, bro, what's wrong with you? Then then you need to really start getting some professional opinion about what's going on. Again, it doesn't mean you have a mental health problem. It may just mean you need support during a rough patch. Let me tell you, situations can create problems with sleep, and situations can cause problems with presenting anxiety and depression symptoms. The loss of a loved one, moving to a new town and it wasn't your decision to move, um, moving to a new house or community and you don't like the surroundings. Um, any change in life, believe it or not, one of the biggest, most dramatic changes in our life is going from high school to college. That is like a number one trigger for symptoms. I don't want to say number one, but it's pretty high up there. It's a big life change. And many times people struggle with that transition from childhood to adulthood because there's so many added responsibilities and there's a worry that so many things can go wrong. Also, test grades, test scores, major exams, especially if there's a lot of outside anticipation that you're going to make a certain grade or reach a certain level. Those periods of time can interrupt sleep, but it's situational. So it doesn't mean you have a chronic disorder, but it does mean you may have to get extra support from a professional. So there's all these there's sleep support groups. There's a lot of clinics in the Houston area, greater Houston area, that support sleep. And so you just may need support during that transitional time in your life so that you don't have a lifelong chronic, you know what I'm saying, mental health problem. And even if you did, it's just a matter of managing your sleep and your sleep routine.
So, what resources does NAMI provide for individuals struggling to help with sleep and mental health?
Well, I can tell you right now, we're the mental health. We are the family to family, peer to peer, person to person, heart to heart. We're the group that says, you know what, if you've got this, or this, and it could include a sleep disorder, guess what? Me too. And so we're the group that um, we have psychoeducation classes to learn more about mental health conditions. We also have support groups. So if you're a person that um, you have this new diagnosis or this new condition and you're trying to find, well, who else in the world is like me? We're that group. So we have free support groups, free classes, and a lot of events to fight stigma. So many times, nothing happens in a vacuum. You may have one person in your friend circle or one person in your family who may be struggling, but all of that group wants to support that one person, right? So then I encourage you to join some of our NAMI activities and events and show or demonstrate to that one person who may be, working on bettering themselves, that, hey, all of us have things that we have to work on. So we're an anti-stigma, stigma busting group. So that's what NAMI can do. But if it's sleep specifically, I can put in the chat a few of the resources that I have found. Um, and some of the local clinics, doctors, hospitals, provided that you have access to those types of supports, you can get help. But really, everybody can get support because in every county, there's it's called a local mental health authority. And if you go to any local mental health authority and you're uninsured or underinsured, you can say, hey, these are the issues I'm dealing with. Can you help me? And those physicians, I'm located in a local mental health authority in Harris County. It's called the Harris Center. But further north, it's called Tri-County Services. And further south, it's called Texana. But there's just so many options. The very first thing I would do is join a support group because then you find other people who have a similar situation and you find out what they do. A lot of times people are very welcoming and they want to tell you what works and what doesn't work. But I can assure you that when sleep suffers, mental health rarely remains stable. So you want to address the sleep as early as you can.
So, what advice would you give to someone who feels that their sleep issues are affecting their mental health?
I would say reach out, reach out, reach out, right? Um, you can, of course, Google some local community-based organizations. But, if you go to the doctor, if you have a relationship with your primary care physician, I would go there. That would be the very first person I talk to. The person that you go to make sure that everything is running right once a year. Okay, don't wait till the next year. Call them now, Even in a school nurse, you could go to the school nurse and say, look, I'm just not sleeping. What do you know in this community that will help me with my sleep? Um, Also, there's warm lines all over the place. I know NAMI has a warm line, and that number is 713-970-4483. If you talk to any of our operators and say, hey, I'm looking for resources on how to get better sleep, they're going to give it to you. You know, but the Harris Center has a warm line. There's a warm line with Mental Health America, Greater Houston. Um, the Hope and Healing Center has a warm line. And so these are people who, at no cost, there's no fee, they will talk to you and guide you and help you navigate, where to find help. I'm going to give you one more. If your sleep is being interrupted because of grief, right? And you can't stop thinking about the person that you've lost. You can't make peace with it. There's an organization called Bo's Place, BO''S, Bo's Place, and they also have clinicians that answer the phone and they will help guide you to where you can get support, not only for your sleep, but also for your grief. And I'm just thinking about some of the myths that people have. People think, and this is a true statement, people think that they can function with 4 to 5 hours of sleep, and that's just not true. You need 8 to 9 hours of quality sleep in order to get into the REM state of sleep and then come back out. Chronic short sleep like that, 4 to 5 hours only, 2 to 3 hours only, it's going to reduce your cognitive flexibility. It's going to mess up your emotional regulation. And it's also going to lead to more illness because it decreases your immune system, right? And so, um, yeah, you just can't keep going on 3, 4, and 5 hours sleep. Your body will not. And then a lot of times teenagers think it's normal because, hey, I don't even start till 10 o'clock, right? But the reality is adolescents need even more sleep. They need up to 10 hours sleep. And chronic deprivation increases depression and risky behavior. Your decision making goes down. And so if you really want to be a star athlete, if you really want to be a star student and do your very best, then you can't cheat yourself out of sleep. That's just, you know. And the reason I bring up grief is because many times we don't recognize we have a sleep problem because we think we're just grieving, right? So you may have nightmares, you may have difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. You may feel restless, tossing and turning because, you've lost someone in your life. And so the grief process requires attention. It requires attention. And so the number one agency I know that has online groups is Bo's Place. And they were created just for children and teens. Now they do support adults, but when they were founded, they were started for children and teens, and it's an excellent resource.
So, how can family and friends support someone who is struggling with sleep?
You know what? I always say before you go to someone, like if you go to someone and say, "Hey, dude, I need you to go to the doctor." That it never goes over well. If you start just with go see the professional, nah. You could share with someone, I've had anxiety. I've had these racing thoughts that keep me from going to sleep at night. Or I've had depression, which makes me wake up super early and then I can't go back to sleep. Or it's made me sleep for 4 or 5 days straight. Like if there's a spring break, forget it. I'm in the bed the whole time. Um, Share your experiences. All of us know what it is to be sad. All of us knows what it is to be anxious. And many of us we bounce back, but we can at least speak to the fact, I've experienced a trauma, and this is only if it's true, right? And it's disrupted my sleep and created nightmares. Or you could even, if you have a diagnosis, say, look, I'm diagnosed with XYZ and during my manic phase I don't sleep, and so I need extra support, and my doctor does this and this. You should talk to a professional. Never share drugs. Never share, like if you have experienced trouble with sleep and then the doctor gave you something, the worst thing you can do is share it with someone, because when a doctor gives it to you, they're monitoring how it affects your body, but that friend doesn't have that same level of monitoring, and you don't know what underlying issues that individual may have. So we leave the doctoring to the doctors and share our own experiences, because, like I said, when you put a face on it, stigma goes away. There's no more shame, blame, or guilt when you say, "Hey, look, it's me too." And I remember when very early on, I needed support because I had children who were having trouble with not only sleep but other areas of their neurology. And I knew about the support groups, and I didn't want to go. And I'm gonna tell you why I didn't want to go. Because I was crying all the time, and I didn't want to cry in public, and I didn't want other people in my business. Okay. But I needed to go. I knew I needed to go. My next door neighbor said, "Angelina, I'll go with you." And so sometimes as a friend, you can just go with someone. Not that you need the help, but you're trying to help someone else feel safe and secure and heard and seen. And you can do that by just, you know, partnering with them in their journey, partner with them in their research online, partner with them maybe in sitting there, letting their parents know, or talking to the school nurse, uh, be there with them, you know, just co-regulate, because the person is probably, it's probably a scary situation. So, you know, you just want to be there as a support for that person. How do we say be a friend?
So, what are 1 to 2 simple strategies people can use to start tonight to improve their sleep?
Number one, clean up the sleep diet. That's just number one, because that might make sleep like a whole goal, like your goal. And don't give up if on the first try it doesn't work. Keep it up for 1 or 2 weeks. And all the things, a hot shower, hot bath. Um, what's that smell? Lavender. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I can't stand lavender. But I do have smells I like. So there's this whole thing about sensory integration, and some smells mean wake up, and some smells mean sleep, you know? And so you can go to Target, you can go to any store and find the little um things that give off smell, and find a scent that'll help you feel like, oh, it's time for, a lot of times, baby lotion and baby oil and baby, because when we were babies, guess what we did a lot of? We slept. And your brain has an emotional memory to things that happened to us in our childhood. You may not think it, but it's true. You can remember what made you feel safe. I remember I was very close to this aunt. She always had peppermints everywhere, and the smell of peppermints made me feel joy. So find something that, the hot shower, the low lights, maybe blue lights or red light, a certain color of light might help you fall asleep. Some people use raindrop noise or snowy sounding noise. They have these noise machines, but definitely put down the telephone and the TV and the laptop. Make sure that 2 hours before you're planning to go to sleep that you're not looking at one of those. You know what I always tell people? Well, I probably shouldn't say. Let me find another way to say it. Read a book. But there's one particular book that puts me to sleep all the time, but that might offend people. Um, but find a book, uh, and the more complicated, the better, because then you have no idea what it's saying and you just keep reading, right? And you're going to go to sleep. Um, but find some activity that leads to sleep for you and do that. Lower the temperature in your bedroom, you know. Um, I know I have one child, she likes sheets made out of t-shirt material, and those sheets help her fall asleep. So just find the things that support sleep and don't eat right before going to bed. Don't exercise. Exercise gets your adrenaline going. Don't exercise right. Although some people, they exercise and they go right to sleep, but you have to find what works for you. So those would be the first things I would do in terms of what are the first steps? Address your own. Get to know you, your own sleep diet. Find out what works for you.
So, what is the most important message that you want our listeners to take away today?
I think the most um, important thing is that rest, which is just a quiet mind, and sleep, it's not you being lazy and it's not wasting time. It's not to be discounted as worthless. It's treatment. It is the way in which our brain replenishes. I think our attitude is we're young, we're supposed to stay up all night. Um, we can bounce back because we've got youth on our side, but the developing brain and the learning brain requires sleep. So I want to say sleep is not a luxury, right? It's required for optimum health. And I think that's the takeaway. Um, and if your sleep is not optimal, then do everything you can on your own. But after that, reach out for professional help.
Thank you so much. That wraps up episode 1 of our Sleep Connection, part of the Mind at Midnight podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and resources for us today. For our listeners, you can learn more about NAMI and access support at NAMI Houston. Sleep is essential, and we hope today's conversation helps you take the step forward for better rest and mental health. Thank you.